Right, so Keir Starmer, he's a slippery customer, isn't he? And no, I'm not referring to the metric ton of product he's stuck in his head. One minute he was all about the Green New Deal, renamed the Green Industrial Strategy so as to distance himself a little bit from Jeremy Corbyn, but a pledge made just 3 weeks ago has now been dumped. Dumped already, 3 weeks! 3 weeks, it had already been watered down a little bit, but within 3 weeks it's been binned off entirely. He's flip-flopping so fast these days, he's in danger of his head falling off. On the 28th of May, as one of Starmer's 5 key pledges to the electorate, yes, he's back to making pledges again. Hey, how long are they going to keep for this time? He pledged to block all North Sea gas and oil projects and limit borrowing for energy to green investments only as part of a net zero strategy for Britain under a Labour government. Wonderful, great. Okay, tell us a bit more. Well, it's in the bin already, isn't it? On the 28th of May, Labour stood up and said it would block the continuation of gas and oil drilling in the Rosebank fields, west of Shetland, a new field that won't produce for years in all likelihood. It takes ages for new fields to get going and become economically profitable, maximum product coming out of the wells and so on and so forth. The contract is expected to be approved by the Tories within weeks. So why the change of heart then, Keith? Whilst the Murdoch Times tries to blame the trade unions for leaning on him, Starmer is far more interested in donors these days, of course. I was scrolling through Twitter reading comments on this story this morning, and I just happened to come across Phil Morehouse on there, he of the A Different Bias YouTube channel, taking on the excellent Stats for Lefties account. And Phil came out with, "This is not a change in policy, and the policy was announced in January, not May. The policy was that no new licences would be granted. This is a licence being granted by the Tories, not Labour." To which the Stats account answered, "I'm sure those semantics will help us all greatly when the ice caps melt." It tickled me no end. Now, I like Phil's channel in many respects, but he will not criticise Starmer. He is a Labour man through and through, and he's bending over backwards here to defend what is frankly indefensible. We need to get away from oil and gas, and Starmer now is no longer doing that. The Tory policy for Rosebank was announced in January. Starmer set out his position to block new fields in May. Now, if Starmer was to keep his word, he'd block this still, keep his pledge to block it. This is a new licence, after all, even if it is the Tories signing it off. But we don't have to take the words of a spat on Twitter between two accounts there to get the gist of this. We can get the words from Starmer himself, being interviewed about all of this just this morning. On Radio 4, first thing, Michelle Hussein asked Starmer all about this. She put to him, "On oil and gas, you will be allowing new drilling in existing oil and gas fields." And Starmer's answer to this question, as it was, "We're not going to interfere with existing licences, and that includes licences that are granted before we come to power." Sorry, Phil. Starmer's thrown you under the bus, mate. Rosebank will be in existence before we see government change. Michelle Hussein followed up quickly on this, though, putting to Keith that therefore the amount of drilling in those existing fields could also go up, to which Starmer answered, "It's very important for investors who are going to invest in the UK to know there's continuity if there's a change of government. And therefore what we will do in the future is one thing, but how we will ensure continuity is another. And I've talked to the sector about this, as you would expect." Continuity is important for investors in gas and oil, folks, more so than ending said continuity to save the fucking planet and start putting climate change before profit for wealthy people. Let's destroy the planet as long as the shareholders become the last to die, eh? Continuity of government in their interests and not ours, certainly not the planet. He was also on Good Morning Britain this morning as well, and he was asked specifically on the matter of Rosebank again, and again said it is important that investors have certainty and that oil and gas will be part of the mix for decades to come, probably into the 2050s. All this announced with no hint of irony on a day where he was announcing green energy plans to be implemented by 2030. He wants more onshore wind farms. He wants to lift the ban on them. It's windier offshore, I'd argue. That's part of his plans too. But okay, set that aside for a minute though. Rosebank is estimated to be capable of producing 500 million barrels of oil a year when it gets to capacity. But it's a dirty industry producing oil and gas, and the emissions this new field would produce will cause the UK to exceed carbon emission targets by 2028. So screw the investors. Not only has Starmer rode back on this, though, the plot has thickened further. Currently, there are 76 companies, including BP and Shell, no less, and we all know about them, don't we, applying for some 115 available licenses to drill in the North Sea. And this move to not block existing oil and gas fields by the time Labour takes power next year? Well, he felt it important enough to ring the likes of BP and Shell to assure them that he was not going to block their plans for investment, because the investors are suddenly so important to Starmer. He apparently had a big ring round last Friday ahead of what's left of his clean power mission, as his trip to Scotland's being called, that he's launching in Edinburgh today, chasing Scottish votes as it is. Starmer has announced that Britain's green energy future will be built in Scotland, apparently, with new infrastructure to construct and maintain offshore wind, offering opportunity to the stagnating Scottish economy that apparently only his Labour can fix. But if Scottish people are as savvy as the rest of us that are on to Team Keith, I wouldn't be taking his word for a damn thing. Starmer is sucking up to big oil and gas investors, the likes of Shell, who have got away with not paying tax for years, able to offset it against stuff like further gas and oil exploration. They, as producers, distributors and suppliers of energy, as well as other similar companies, has bled us dry through our bills, claiming poverty because of the low profit margin at the supply end of that chain, completely ignoring the massive profits made at the production and distribution end, which the energy watchdog Ofgem has absolutely no oversight over either. We, out of the public purse, via the government, instead of levying more tax from them, offering them more public money to offset our impossible to pay bills as was done, before finally agreeing to a windfall tax of some such as public outcry grew, something that was agreed, incidentally, to remain in place until 2028. Yet our bills are dropping and the Tories have gone, oh, our poor energy buddies, let's take away this nasty, horrible windfall tax from you, there. And they're ditching it early. Oh, to be an energy company, the subsidies and tax breaks, they're just glorious, aren't they? And now Starmer is kissing their backsides too. I remember when he promised to renationalise them all. Can you remember that vague nugget once upon a time? But then that's the value of a Starmer promise, summed up, isn't it? Worth about as much as the tax paid by these oil companies. The green stuff will be nominal. It's for show. I wonder if Dale Vince will want a refund of the £1.5 million he, as the boss of ecotricity, has given Labour, apparently just before Starmer pledged to block all new oil and gas fields. But more to the point, how much in donations has Labour secured from oil and gas interests with this latest pledge busted, coming out to bat for them now instead? Investors before planet is how it has always been under capitalism. It's why this planet is in the state it's in. It's why this country is in the state it's in. And as a Green, this is anathema to me on both counts. Green policy, incidentally, is net zero by 2030 and dealing with the biodiversity crisis that nobody else is talking about either. It's not just about us, after all. It's all the rest of the life on Earth that's affected by it. Starmer is for sale to the highest bidder, and his policies will be to suit them, not us, and not the planet either. And when you've liked, shared and subscribed to the channel that will hold this bloke to account, even if others refuse to, you can watch this other recent promise broken by Team Keith, where apparently it's no longer fiscally responsible to help you with childcare as promised and get you back into work if you've had to give it up. How does that make economic sense? And I'll see you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.